Hello friends and explorers chasing the relentless struggle against nature's colossal masters. Today, we'll focus on how humans manage to survive among mammoths and giant sloths. In a world ruled by claws and teeth, we'll witness these incredible strategies, developed not just for hunting, but to avoid becoming prey through the power of intelligence, planning, and the protective force of fire. I'm curious, which of these creatures impresses you the most when you think of this vast world? I always enjoy reading your comments. The world is young and the air is thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming life. The sun, a brilliant and unforgiving eye, tracks its slow course across a sky of impossible blue, casting long shifting shadows from a primeval forest that stretches to the very edges of imagination. This is not our modern world, not a world tamed by steel and concrete, governed by the steady rhythm of clocks and the predictable glow of electric light. No, this is a world of raw, untamed power, a world of immense scale and profound mystery, a world where the line between earth and sky, between life and death is blurred and uncertain. And into this world we are born. We stand on two legs, our forms slight against the monumental backdrop of ancient trees and towering cliffs. Our skin is bare, our teeth are blunt, our claws are nothing more than fragile nails. We are newcomers, a species of immense potential, yet possessing so little in the way of natural armor or inherent strength. We are the dreamers, the tool makers, the storytellers, and we are surrounded by monsters. The very ground beneath our feet trembles with the passage of creatures whose size defies belief. Great shambling mountains of flesh and muscle that shake the leaves from the trees as they pass. The forests are alive with the calls of beasts whose voices are like rolling thunder, whose feathers are like woven sunlight, and whose fangs are longer than a man's forearm. In the darkness, eyes gleam with a cold, predatory intelligence, and the night is filled with sounds that speak of a struggle for survival that has been raging for millions of years. This is the world of our deepest past, a world we have long forgotten in our comfortable present, a world where every sunrise was a gift and every shadow held a potential threat. To survive here in this world of giants and terrors required more than just strength or speed. It demanded something else, something unique that flickered within the human mind. It demanded an unbreakable will to live, a cunning that could turn a weakness into a strength, and a spirit of cooperation that could bind individuals together into a force more powerful than any single beast. Our ancestors did not merely cower in the dark, waiting for extinction. They observed, they learned, they adapted. They read the signs of the land as a scholar reads a book, understanding the language of the wind, the meaning of a broken branch, the story told by a track in the mud. They took the stones beneath their feet and with patient, deliberate skill shaped them into the first extensions of their own. Will-sharp edges to cut heavy cores, to crush pointed tips to pierce, and they told stories around the flickering safety of a campfire, a circle of light holding back the immense and watchful dark. They began to weave their experiences into narratives. They gave names to the monsters that stalked them. They charted the movements of the herds. They remembered the locations of fresh water and safe shelter. This fire was more than just warmth and protection from the creatures of the night. It was the world's first classroom, the first library, the birthplace of shared knowledge. It was here that the collective memory of the group was forged, a memory that would be passed down from one generation to the next, growing richer and more detailed with each passing year. This was the beginning of our journey, the first tentative steps on a path that would eventually lead us to dominate the planet. This is the story of that incredible journey. It is the story of how a seemingly fragile species, armed with little more than a sharpened stone and a growing understanding of the world, learned to not only survive, but to thrive in a landscape filled with challenges beyond our modern comprehension. It is a tale of courage in the face of overwhelming odds, of ingenuity born from necessity, and of the slow, patient kindling of the spark of civilization. It is the story of how early humans survived in a world full of monsters. So, let us step back through the veils of time. Let the modern world fade away and journey together into the deep, remembered twilight of our shared past, to a time when the world was wild and we were but one voice in a vast and roaring chorus. The day's light begins to fade, its golden hue deepening into the bruised purples and deep blues of twilight. With this transformation comes a shift in the very nature of the world. The familiar becomes strange, the safe paths become treacherous, and the hidden corners of the forest awakened with a new and dangerous life. For our early ancestors, the approaching night was the most perilous time, a long hours-long trial where vulnerability was absolute. It was in this daily confrontation with darkness that they made one of their most crucial discoveries, not a tool of stone, but a place of stone, the cave. And within that cave, they would learn to harness the most transformative element they would ever know. The search for shelter was a daily imperative, as fundamental as the search for food or water. A good shelter was more than just a roof. It was a barrier, a stronghold, a sanctuary, and nothing provided a more formidable natural fortress than the mouth of a cave. Finding one was a moment of profound relief, a lottery won against the relentless pressures of the wild. But entry was never assumed, never careless. The approach was always cautious, a slow and deliberate ritual of observation. The ground at the entrance was scrutinized for tracks, the deep, heavy pad of a cave bear, the scuttling marks of large predators, or the telltale signs of snakes. The air was sniffed, tested for the musky scent of a resident animal, or the stale odor of decay. Stones were thrown into the dark opening, the resulting echoes listened to with intense concentration, revealing the depth of the cavern and any movement within. If the cave was empty, it was a gift. If it was occupied, it presented a dire risk, but sometimes a calculated one. The evidence of massive cave bears, creatures of immense power that could dwarf a human, often meant seeking shelter elsewhere. But smaller occupants could sometimes be driven out with firebrands and noise, a desperate, terrifying gamble to claim a precious space. Once secured, the cave became the heart of the group's world. Its thick stone walls blunted the biting wind and the chilling rains. Its confined entrance was a natural choke point, a place that could be watched and defended, where a few determined individuals could hold off a much larger predator. Inside, the temperature remained relatively constant, a refuge from the killing cold of winter nights and the oppressive heat of the summer sun. Within this stone womb, another miracle was nurtured, the mastery of fire. It is unlikely that our ancestors initially created fire. Rather, they captured it. They would have witnessed it in its most terrifying forms. Lightning strike setting a tree ablaze, a raging forest fire sweeping across the plains. They saw its destructive power, but a curious and brave mind among them must have seen something more. They saw that the great predators, the saber-toothed cats, and the packs of hyenas feared it. They saw that its light pushed back the absolute blackness of the night. And they discovered, perhaps by retrieving a charred animal from the aftermath of a blaze, that it transformed food, making it easier to chew and digest. The first great step was to take a burning branch from a natural fire and transport it carefully, tenderly back to the sanctuary of the cave. Keeping that flame alive became a sacred duty. A designated firekeeper, often one of the elders, no longer able to travel far, would be tasked with nurturing the embers, feeding it with dry grass, twigs, and larger pieces of wood, ensuring it never went out. The fire was life itself. Its flickering light flooded the cave, painting dancing shadows on the walls and banishing the fears that the darkness bred. It provided warmth that allowed their slender, hairless bodies to survive in climates that would otherwise have killed them. It became the social heart of the group, the place around which they gathered to eat, to sleep, to groom one another, and to share the events of the day. And then came the next great leap, learning to make fire. This was the moment humanity truly seized a power that belonged only to the gods of nature. The methods were slow, arduous, requiring immense skill and patience. The friction of a hard wooden drill spun rapidly between the palms against a softer wooden. Fireboard could, with relentless effort and the right kind of tinder, generate a glowing ember. A spark struck from flint against a piece of iron pite could, if caught in a nest of dry fungus, be breathed into a tiny flame. This was knowledge of immense power. It meant that fire was no longer a gift of chance, a lucky find to be preserved at all costs. It was a tool that could be created at will. A group with the knowledge to make fire was a group that could travel farther, survive in colder lands, and secure their nights against the terrors that lurked beyond the circle of light. The cave and the fire within it became the first true home, the first classroom, and the first fortress, allowing a vulnerable species to establish a permanent foothold in a world of monsters. Within the protective circle of firelight, a different kind of spark was being nurtured, one that would prove just as revolutionary as the mastery of flame. It was the spark of innovation, a slow, dawning understanding that the world was not just a series of threats to be avoided, but a repository of materials to be shaped. The human hand, with its remarkable dexterity and opposing thumb, was not merely for grasping branches or throwing stones. It was an instrument of creation, waiting for a idea to guide it. And that idea began with the most humble of objects, a river-smooth stone. The earliest tools were not made, but found heavy round cobble was good for cracking open bones for their rich marrow. A sharp-edged piece of flint, fractured naturally, could slice through tough animal hide more cleanly than any tooth. But at some pivotal moment, a profound cognitive leap occurred. An ancestor, perhaps frustrated by the inadequacy of a found object, picked up one stone and deliberately struck it against another. The goal was not to break it randomly, but to shape it, to control the fracture, to produce a predictable and useful edge. That first successful strike, the clean clink that produced a flake with a razor-sharp edge, was a moment of creation as significant as any in history. It was the birth of the tool-making tradition. This was not a single discovery, but a slowly accumulating body of knowledge passed down through generations. The skilled tool-makers of the group, those with the patience and the precise motor control, learned the language of stone. They understood that flint and obsidian fractured in a certain way, that a stone core had to be carefully prepared, that striking at just the right angle and with just the right force would detach a perfect flake. These flakes became the universal knives of the ancient world, light, incredibly sharp, and disposable. The core itself, further worked, became a hand axe, a teardrop-shaped masterpiece of multi-purpose design. It was a butchery knife, a digger for roots, a dismembering tool, and a weapon, It was the first Swiss Army knife crafted from stone, but tools alone were not enough to ensure survival. The world was too complex, its dangers too varied, and its opportunities too fleeting. Knowledge of where to find water during a drought, how to track a specific herd of migrating animals, or which plants were nutritious and which were poisonous, was the true currency of survival. This vast and intricate library of information had to be stored and transmitted. And so, alongside the technology of stone, the technology of the mind was evolving. The dawn of language, it began likely with gestures and grunts, pointing at a source of danger or a source of food. But as social groups became more complex and their knowledge more detailed, a more sophisticated system was needed. The first words were probably nouns, names for critical things: water, fire, lion, berry. Then came verbs: come, go, run, kill. The ability to combine these into a simple message. Lion near water was a revolutionary form of defense and coordination. It allowed for planning, for the relay of information over distance, for the sharing of past experiences to guide future actions around the fire at night. This Nant language truly began to flourish. It was here that the elders, their faces lit by the dancing flames, would point to the walls of the cave, and using a mixture of words, gestures, and sounds, would tell the stories of the hunt. They would recount the behavior of the mammoth, the cunning of the bison, the courage of the hunters who drove them. They would trace the migrations on the ground with a stick, naming the landmarks: the river of the 3 hills, the valley where the sun sets. They would tell cautionary tales of those who ate the red-spotted leaf and never woke up. This was the world's first curriculum. The young, listening rapidly, were not just being entertained. They were being educated. They were downloading a survival manual directly into their minds. A manual written in the collective experience of their people. Language became the invisible tool, more powerful than any hand axe. It allowed for the coordination of complex hunting strategies, turning a scattered group of individuals into a disciplined tactical unit. It enabled the precise sharing of knowledge about the changing seasons and the behavior of plants, reducing the risk of starvation. It bound the group together with shared stories and a shared understanding of their world, creating a collective identity that was stronger than any individual. The stone tool extended the power of the human hand, but language extended the power of the human mind across time and space, allowing one generation to stand on the shoulders of the one that came before. It was the beginning of culture, the first thread in the vast tapestry of human civilization. Beyond the safety of the firelight, beyond the known boundaries of their shelters, lay the true test of their ingenuity and courage. The world was populated by giants, by creatures of immense speed and power. A single human armed with a sharpened stick and a stone hand axe was no match for a towering mammoth, a charging bison, or even a swift and agile deer. To face these creatures alone was to invite certain death, and so our ancestors developed a weapon that no single predator, no matter how powerful its jaws or how sharp its claws, could ever possess. They perfected the strategy of the cooperative hunt, transforming themselves from potential prey into the most persistent and cunning predators the world had ever seen. This was not a casual undertaking. It was a meticulously planned operation, a ritual of survival that required intelligence, communication, and an absolute trust in one's kin. The hunt began long before the first spear was thrown. With hours, sometimes days, of patient observation, scouts would move silently through the landscape, their eyes reading the ground like an open book. A crushed blade of grass, a fresh dropping, a single hair caught on a thorn bush. These were the letters and words of the story they were trying to decipher. They learned to identify the tracks of individual animals to determine their age, their size, and even their state of health. They noted the direction of the wind, for a single errant scent could betray their presence and send the entire herd into a panicked flight. Knowledge of the prey was as important as knowledge of the land. They studied the habits of the great herds where they watered at dawn, where they grazed at midday, where they bedded down for the night. They learned the social structure of these animals, identifying the lead females who dictated the herd's movement, and the young, the old, or the sick who might be the most vulnerable. They understood the personalities of their quarry, the skittish nature of deer, the stubborn defensiveness of bison, the immense calm power of the mammoth. This was not a random pursuit of meat. It was a targeted campaign. When the moment was right, the plan was set in motion. The hunting party, a group of men and women, each with a designated role, would move into position. Their success depended on a deep, almost telepathic understanding facilitated by the language they were slowly mastering. A subtle hand gesture from behind a rock, the low call of a bird mimicked perfectly. These signals coordinated their movements over vast distances. The strategy often involved a division of labor. The fastest and most agile hunters, the drivers, would position themselves downwind of the herd. Their role was to reveal themselves at the critical moment, to create noise and movement to channel the herd's panic in a specific direction. Meanwhile, the strongest and most experienced hunters, the ambushers, would lie in wait along a predetermined path, often a narrow game trail or a natural bottleneck between hills or a riverbank. Here, the landscape itself became their ally. As the startled herd thundered towards them, driven by fear, the ambushers would rise from their concealment. This was the moment of supreme danger and opportunity. They were not aiming to bring down a healthy full-grown beast in its prime with a single throw. That was a fantasy. Their goal was to injure, to weaken, to harry. A volley of sharpened spears would fly, not aimed for a killing blow to the heart, but for the legs, the flanks, the shoulders. A wounded animal, one that could not keep up with the herd, was the objective. The hunt then entered its most grueling phase. The pursuit, a bison or an aurochs, even with a spear lodged deep in its muscle, could run for miles. The hunters would follow. Their endurance, their greatest asset, while the animal was built for explosive speed. The human body, with its ability to sweat and its efficient bipedal gait, was built for persistence. They would track the bleeding creature for hours under the relentless sun, never letting it rest, never letting its wounds cool, slowly, patiently draining its life force through a combination of blood loss and exhaustion. Finally, when the great beast stumbled and fell for the last time, there was no time for celebration. The work was not over. Butchering a multi-ton animal was a monumental task that required the entire group. With their expertly crafted stone tools, they would work quickly, skinning the hide, which would provide warmth and shelter, cutting the rich meat into transportable strips, and cracking the long bones for the precious fatty marrow inside. Nothing was wasted. The success of the hunt fed the entire community, but it did more than that. It reinforced the social bonds, proving that their strength was not in their individual might, but in their unity, their communication, and their shared purpose. They had learned that by working together they could bring down monsters, as the cooperative hunt demonstrated mastery over the tangible world. The human mind was embarking on a parallel journey into a realm just as real and consequential to our ancestors, the unseen world. Life was a precarious balance, a constant negotiation between bounty and scarcity, life and death. The rains could come or they could fail. The herds could arrive in vast, thundering numbers or bypass their traditional routes entirely. A successful hunt could mean feasting for weeks. A failure could mean the slow, knowing ache of hunger. In the face of this immense uncertainty, a profound need emerged to explain, to influence, and to appease the vast invisible forces that clearly governed their existence. This was the birth of the spiritual world, a dimension populated by spirits, ancestors, and powerful entities that resided in every rock, tree, river, and animal. The world was not a collection of inanimate objects and biological processes. It was a living, conscious, and often willful being. The rustling of leaves was not just the wind, but the whisper of the tree spirit. The sudden appearance of a water source in a barren landscape was not a geological accident, but a gift from the spirit of the earth. The great mammoth that provided so much was not merely a beast, but a powerful entity whose consent for the hunt had to be earned. To navigate this spirit-filled world, our ancestors developed rituals. These were not mere superstitions. They were a practical technology of the soul, a set of procedures designed to maintain harmony with the forces that controlled their fate. Before a hunt, there might be a ceremony. The hunters, their bodies painted with ochre and charcoal, would dance around the fire, their movements mimicking the stealth of the predator, the flight of the prey, and the final triumphant kill. This was a form of sympathetic magic, an attempt to act out the desired outcome, to influence reality through representation. They chanted, they dreamed, they called upon the spirit of the animal, asking for its permission, explaining their need and promising to honor its sacrifice. The most profound of these rituals are preserved for us on the walls of deep, silent caves far from the living areas. Venturing into these subterranean chambers with the flickering light of a grease lamp was to enter the womb of the earth, a sacred space. Here, in the absolute quiet, broken only by the drip of water and the crackle of the lamp, they created the world's first art. A hand placed against the rock wall was outlined in blown red or black pigment. Permanent signature, a declaration of I was here. Then came the animals with breathtaking skill and observation. They painted the bison, the mammoths, the horses, and the deer. These were not simple doodles. They were masterpieces of observation, capturing the essence of the creatures. The sheer mass of the bison, the graceful curve of the deer's neck, the shaggy power of the mammoth. This art was not decoration, it was ritual. By painting the animal, the artist was capturing its spirit. By symbolically wounding it with painted spears or arrows, they were ensuring a successful hunt in the real world. These caves were the first cathedrals, places where the community could connect with the powers of creation and the cycle of life and death. The act of creation itself was a form of communion. Alongside the animal spirits, the concept of the ancestor began to take root. The wise elder who had died was not gone forever. Their spirit lingered, watching over the group, a part of the collective memory and identity. The first burials with bodies carefully placed in a sleeping position, often accompanied by tools, weapons, or a sprinkling of ochre color associated with life and blood, suggests a belief in an afterlife, a journey to another world. This reverence for ancestors created a timeless connection, a chain of knowledge and tradition that stretched back into the deep past and forward into the future. It solidified the group's identity, giving them a shared history and a shared destiny. In seeking to control the unseen world, our ancestors were, in fact, exploring the deepest recesses of their own minds, giving form to their fears, their hopes, and their awe in the face of a magnificent and terrifying world. The world our ancestors knew was not a static stage, but a living, breathing entity in constant flux. The climate shifted in great, slow breaths. Ice ages gripped the continents in frozen fists, locking vast quantities of water in towering glaciers, causing sea levels to drop and revealing land bridges that were once submerged. At other times, the world warmed, the ice retreated, and new corridors opened through previously impassable terrain. Pushed by these changing climates, the need for new resources, or perhaps simply by that restless, innate curiosity that defines the human spirit, groups began to move. They ventured beyond the familiar horizons, becoming the first explorers, the first pioneers, stepping into landscapes no human eye had ever seen. This was the Great Migration, a slow, relentless seepage of humanity across the planet, a journey that would eventually take them from their African cradle to the farthest corners of the globe. It was not a planned expedition with a map and a destination. It was a generational creep, a process of moving, settling, and then moving again. A group might follow a migrating herd for several seasons, gradually becoming familiar with the new valley. As their numbers grew, a splinter group might move on, seeking unclaimed hunting grounds. They followed the rivers, the natural highways of the ancient world, which provided water, food, and a clear path through unknown lands. Each new environment presented a unique set of challenges that demanded innovation and adaptation. The first groups to push into the colder climates of the north faced a cold more intense than anything their ancestors had known. Survival here required a new level of technological sophistication. They learned to track and hunt the great woolly mammoths and shaggy rhinoceroses, creatures that were not only sources of massive quantities of meat, but also of other critical materials. The thick, warm hides were essential for clothing and shelter. The long bones and tusks were used to construct the frames for sturdy dwellings, sunk partially into the ground for insulation against the biting wind. They learned to sew using bone needles and sinew thread, crafting form-fitting garments that trapped body heat, and allowed them to operate in conditions that would have been fatal to their more lightly clad relatives. Other groups spread across the vast plains and grasslands, where the horizon was an endless sea of grass and the primary game with the great herds of bison, wild horses, and antelope. Life here was one of movement. These hunters became masters of the open space, their lives dictated by the migration patterns of the herds. Their shelters had to be lightweight and portable. They developed new hunting techniques suited to the open terrain, perhaps using fire to drive animals towards waiting, ambushes, or perfecting the art of the thrown spear with the aid of a spear thrower, a lever that increased the weapon's velocity and range, allowing them to strike from a safer distance. The most daring of these journeys were the crossings into truly alien worlds. Some followed the coastlines, learning to harvest the bounty of the sea shellfish, seals, and seabirds, developing the first simple watercraft, perhaps rafts or dugout canoes, to access rich offshore islands. The most epic of these voyages led them across land bridges like the one connecting Asia to the Americas. These were not bridges in the modern sense, but vast exposed stretches of land hundreds of miles wide known as binja. This was a cold, treeless steppe, a harsh and windswept plain, but one teeming with animal life. Generations lived and died on this land bridge, slowly, inexorably moving eastward until they finally descended into a continent completely devoid of humans. A new world filled with its own unique menagerie of monsters and wonders. With each new valley crossed, each new mountain range scaled, and each new river forged, humanity proved its incredible adaptability. They carried with them the essential tools of survival, the knowledge of fire, the skill of tool-making, the power of language, and the strength of social cooperation. But they also constantly refined these tools, inventing new ones to meet new challenges. They were no longer just creatures of a single environment. They were becoming a global species, learning to read the language of every forest, every plain, and every shore, conquering the world not through brute force, but through an unparalleled ability to learn, to innovate, and to endure. In the symphony of the wild, human voices were not the only ones that held meaning. The nights were filled with a chorus of howls, yips, and barks that spoke of another social hunter, another creature that moved in packs and relied on cooperation to survive. This was the world of the wolf, a creature both respected and feared by our ancestors. The wolf was a competitor, a clever predator that hunted the same game. Its eyes gleamed with a sharp intelligence from the shadows at the edge of the firelight, a reminder that humanity was not the only master of the hunt. Yet from this relationship of wary competition, one of the most transformative alliances in the history of our species would eventually emerge. The first steps toward this alliance were likely not born of intention, but of a slow mutual curiosity and a recognition of mutual benefit. Scavenging was a vital part of early human survival, and wolf packs, like human bands, left behind remains from their kills. It is easy to imagine a human group following the trail of a wolf pack, finding a recent kill and driving the canines away to claim the leftovers. But at some point, the dynamic shifted. Perhaps a few less timid wolves, drawn by the smell of cooking meat from a human camp, began to linger at a safe distance, scavenging the bones and discarded offal that the humans left behind. They were no longer just competitors seen at a distance. They became regular, familiar visitors on the periphery of the camp. The humans in turn would have observed these creatures closely. They saw the wolves' incredible senses, their sharp hearing that could detect the faintest footfall, their keen sense of smell that could track an animal for miles. They saw their speed and their endurance. A bold revolutionary idea must have begun to form in the mind of a particularly observant individual. What if these creatures were not just scavengers, but could be partners? The process of domestication was undoubtedly slow, taking generations. It began with the wolves themselves, the boldest, least fearful wolves, the ones that ventured closest to the human camps, were the ones that gained access to this new, reliable food source. Their genes were the ones that were passed on. Over time, natural selection favored those wolves that were more tolerant of and even cooperative with humans. The humans, in turn, may have begun to encourage this relationship. They might have left out extra food for the more useful or appealing individuals, perhaps even adopting orphaned wolf pups, bringing them into the heart of the camp. These adopted pups would have been raised among humans imprinted on them. Seeing the human band as their pack, they grew up alongside human children, their play and their development intertwined. As they matured, their inherent traits became invaluable assets. Their warning barks at the approach of a predator, Sabertooth's cat lurking in the darkness, or a rival human group provided a crucial early warning system, a living, breathing alarm that protected the entire community. They could help track wounded game on a hunt, their noses following a blood trail with an efficiency no human could match. They could even assist in cornering prey or carrying small items. This was not a relationship of master and servant, but a true partnership, a pact of mutual survival. The wolves gained a steady supply of food, protection from larger predators, and a place within a powerful cooperative pack. The humans gained heightened senses, a more efficient means of hunting, and a loyal companion that shared their fires and their fortunes. This alliance fundamentally changed the dynamics of survival. A human group with dogs, for that is what these tamed wolves was slowly becoming, was a more formidable, more secure, and more efficient unit. This first successful domestication was a psychological and technological breakthrough of the highest order. It proved that humans could not only shape stone and fire, but they could also form bonds with other species, integrating them into their social and economic lives. The loyal, watchful eyes of the first dogs by the campfire were a living testament to a new kind of power, the power of alliance. It was a quiet revolution born not from a clash of spears, but from a shared bone and a slowly built trust. An event that would echo through the ages, forever binding the destiny of humanity with that of its first and most faithful friend. The world of the great monsters was not destined to last forever. The immense creatures that had shaped the landscape and the human imagination for millennia, the mammoths, the mastodons, the woolly rhinoceroses, the giant ground sloths, the saber-toothed cats were living on borrowed time. A great change was sweeping across the globe, a shift that would redefine the very face of the planet and the place of humanity within it. The air grew warmer, the vast glaciers began their slow, inexorable retreat, and the continents themselves seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as the ice released its grip. But this warming world, while opening new opportunities, also spelled the end for the magnificent Megapora. The causes of this great extinction were a complex tapestry woven from threads of climate and human ingenuity. The changing climate disrupted the vast grasslands and tundras that these colossal creatures called home. Forests began to spread, replacing the open landscapes that sustained the great herds. The very plants they relied on for food became scarcer or changed in nutritional value. This environmental pressure was immense on its own, but it was compounded by the presence of a new and relentless predator, humans. Armed with sophisticated tools, coordinated hunting strategies, and the invaluable assistance of their canine companions, human groups had become exceptionally efficient hunters. The very skills they had honed for survival now gave them a power they could scarcely have imagined. The great beasts, which had once been the source of awe and terror, were now the most prized of quarries. A single mammoth could feed a group for months. Its tusks and bones provided materials for tools, art, and shelter. The pressure was unrelenting. As human populations grew and spread, the hunting intensified. The combination of a rapidly changing climate and this new intelligent and pervasive predator created a crisis from which the great monsters could not recover. One by one, across the continents, these magnificent species dwindled and vanished, their passing silencing a thunder that had echoed for ages. The world grew quieter. The ground no longer trembled with the same intensity. The forests grew denser where the great herds had once kept them at bay. For humanity, this was a time of profound transition. The loss of the megafauna meant the end of a way of life centered on the grand hunt. They could no longer rely on the occasional monumental success to sustain them for long periods. They had to adapt once more to turn their ingenuity and their hard-won knowledge toward new strategies for survival. Their attention turned inward toward the land itself. The knowledge of plants, once crucial for supplementing their diet, now became a primary focus. They had long understood that seeds scattered on the ground could produce new plants. Now they began to experiment with this process. They started to clear small patches of land to protect the plants that were most useful, to deliberately sow the seeds of the grasses with the largest grains, the tubers that were most nutritious. It was a slow, unconscious process of selection favoring the traits that best served human needs. This was the very beginning of agriculture, a revolution sprouting from the soil of necessity. Simultaneously, the relationship with animals deepened beyond the partnership with the dog. Other species, like wild goats, sheep, and cattle, which had also been hunted, were now seen in a new light. Instead of being pursued, they were managed. They were herded, contained, and their life cycles were controlled. This provided a steady, predictable source of meat, milk, and hides. The hunter was slowly transforming into the herder, the forager into the farmer. The world of the monsters was receding into memory and legend, becoming the stuff of stories told to wily children around the fire. The challenges were far from over. New struggles for resources, new diseases, and the complexities of settled life lay ahead. But the age of being a fragile species in a world of giants was drawing to a close. Through courage, cooperation, and an unparalleled ability to adapt, early humans had not only survived their monstrous world, they had inherited it. The path was now clear for the next great chapter, the slow, deliberate dawn of civilization, built upon the bones of the giants they had outlasted, and the lessons they had learned in the long, long twilight of the prehistoric age. The great extinction was not an end, but a transformation. The silence that settled over the plains and forests where the mammoths and giant elks no longer roamed was not an empty silence. It was a silence filled with potential, a canvas upon which a new world would be painted. The monsters were gone, but their legacy was woven into the very fabric of human existence, etched into our minds, our societies, and our souls. The struggles and triumphs of that ancient era had forged a species uniquely equipped to shape its own destiny. The most immediate legacy was a world made safer, at least from the most colossal physical threats. A child could now wander a little farther from the camp without the immediate danger of a saber-toothed cat. The night, while still dark and filled with the sounds of smaller predators, no longer held the same scale of terror. This newfound security allowed for a shift in focus. The constant, desperate pressure of day-to-day survival lessened just enough for other aspects of the human spirit to flourish. There was more time to sit, to talk, to think, and to create. The knowledge gained from millennia of hunting the giants did not vanish with them. The intricate understanding of animal behavior was now applied to the smaller game that remained, and to the first domesticated animals. The skill of tracking, once used to follow a wounded mammoth for days, was now used to manage herds of goats, or to find the best grazing grounds. The cooperative strategies honed in the great surrounds and ambushes became the foundation for larger, more complex social organizations. The ability to plan, to communicate complex ideas, and to work toward a common goal, skills essential for bringing down a monster, were the very same skills that would soon be used to build the first villages, to irrigate the first fields, and to establish the first laws. The spiritual world, born from the awe of powerful creatures, evolved. The great spirits of the hunt, once embodied by the mammoth and the cave bear, slowly transformed. They became gods of the forest, of the sky, of fertility. The rituals performed in the deep caves to ensure a successful hunt became ceremonies to ensure a bountiful harvest, or a healthy birth of livestock. The art that once depicted the prey on the walls of sacred caves now adorned pottery and the walls of permanent dwellings, telling stories of ancestry and myth, keeping the memory of the old world alive in a new form. The human imagination, once focused on appeasing and conquering the monsters of the external world, began to turn inward, contemplating abstract concepts of order, justice, and the divine, and the stories around the fires, now burning in the heart of settled communities. The elders did not forget. They told of a time when the world was young and full of giants. They spoke of the great hunters of old, whose courage and strength were beyond measure. The monsters of flesh and blood became the monsters of legend, dragons, giants, and colossal beasts of folklore. These stories served as a reminder of where they had come from, of the perils they had overcome, and of the qualities that had allowed them to prevail: bravery, unity, intelligence, and resilience. They were the foundational myths of every culture to come, the bedrock of the human narrative. The world of our early ancestors was a crucible. In its fierce heat, the base elements of a clever primate were transformed into the gold of a conscious, cultural, and dominant species. The challenges they faced were monumental, but each challenge was met with an innovation, a new way of thinking, a stronger social bond. They tamed fire, shaped stone, forged an alliance with the wolf, and ultimately learnt to shape the very plants and animals around them. They moved from being passengers on a planet of monsters to being its stewards and shapers. The echoes of their struggles resonate within us still, in our capacity for both fear and courage, in our deep need for community, and in our relentless drive to understand and master the world around us. The age of monsters had passed, but the age of humanity forged in its shadow was just beginning to brighten the dawn. As the first permanent structures rose from the earth, mud brick homes, stone foundations, fences marking the boundaries of cultivated fields, the old nomadic life began to fade into memory. The rhythm of existence shifted from the unpredictable chase to the predictable cycle of the seasons, from the hunter's tense silence to the farmer's patient labor. Yet beneath this new veneer of civilization, the soul of the monster slayer remained, an indelible imprint on the human spirit. The fire they had carried from the wilderness now burned in the hearths of their homes, a symbol of the unbroken chain that connected them to their profound past. The lessons of that vanished world were not discarded. They were institutionalized. The hunter's keen observation of the natural world became the science of the farmer who learned to read the soil, the weather, and the stars to ensure a good harvest. The toolmaker's patience and precision were channeled into new crafts: the grinding of grain, the weaving of cloth, the firing of pottery, and eventually the smelting of metal. The cooperation that was once a matter of life and death during a hunt became the foundation of community law and trade. The need to defend a kill from rival predators evolved into the need to defend stored grain and settled land, leading to the first organized warfare and the building of walls. Every major step forward was built upon a skill honed in the struggle for survival. This legacy is not merely a historical artifact, it is a living part of us. The adrenaline that courses through a modern person facing a tight deadline is the same. Primal force that once prepared a hunter for the charge of a great beast. Our deep-seated need to belong to a group, to feel part of a team, a company, or a nation is an echo of the absolute dependence our ancestors had on their small, tight-knit bands. The stories we tell in books and films filled with heroes battling overwhelming odds and terrifying creatures are direct descendants of the tales told around those prehistoric campfires. We are still captivated by the fundamental narrative of courage against darkness, of intelligence overcoming brute strength. The world we have built, for all its technological marvels and complex societies, still rests upon the same foundational pillars that allowed early humans to survive: innovation, cooperation, communication, and an enduring resilience in the face of adversity. The monsters have changed shape. They are no longer physical beasts with tusks and claws, but they are no less real. They are the specters of disease, the challenges of climate change, the complexities of global conflict, the inner demons of fear and despair. Yet the tools to face them are the same ones our ancestors forged in the crucible of a wilder earth. We carry their fire within us. It is the fire of curiosity that drives us to explore the deepest oceans and the farthest reaches of space. It is the fire of compassion that allows us to build societies that care for their weak and their ill. It is the fire of ingenuity that constantly seeks solutions to the problems that confront us. The journey that began with a single step away from the safety of a cave with the first controlled spark in the overwhelming dark continues with us. We are the children of those who looked into the eyes of monsters and did not look away. We are the heirs to their courage, their cunning, and their unbreakable will to survive and to thrive. The story of how early humans survived in a world full of monsters is therefore not just a tale of the past. It is the story of how we became who we are. And it is the prologue to every story that is yet to be written. The long night has passed, but the fire still burns, and the dawn of our own making continues to unfold. As the physical world was mastered through tools and fire, an equally vast and mysterious frontier was being explored within the human mind. The same consciousness that could plan a hunt days in advance, remember complex migration routes, and conceive of invisible spirits also possessed a hidden, vibrant world that unfolded behind closed eyes. The world of dreams, in the silent, deep dark of the night, safe within a cave or a sturdy shelter. The minds of our ancestors journeyed to realms where the laws of the waking world did not apply. These dreams were not seen as mere imagination. They were understood as another form of reality, a sacred space where one could communicate with ancestors, receive warnings, and glimpse fragments of the future. The line between the waking world and the dream world was thin and permeable. Her dream of a successful hunt was not just a hopeful fantasy. It was a potent omen, a vision to be shared with the group and used to guide the next day's actions. A nightmare featuring a lurking predator or a falling tree was a serious premonition. A message from the spirit world to be cautious, to change plans, to be vigilant. The dreamer, upon waking, carried a weight of responsibility. They had to accurately recount their vision to describe the symbols and events with as much clarity as they would describe a physical track they had found in the mud. The community would listen intently, interpreting the dream's meaning collectively, weaving its narrative into their practical decision-making. This deep reverence for the inner vision likely played a crucial role in the creation of art and the development of ritual. The powerful, often surreal images that flashed behind their eyelids, the hybrid creatures, the floating figures, the speaking animals found their way onto the walls of caves. The act of painting a bison from memory was one thing, but painting a bison with the horns of a serpent as seen in a dream was an act of capturing a spiritual truth, of giving form to a message from the unseen world. These were not literal representations of the hunt, but maps of the dreamscape, attempts to solidify the fluid visions of the night into a permanent shared reality for the community. Certain individuals may have been more prone to vivid dreams or powerful visionary states, perhaps induced by fatigue, hunger, or the deliberate consumption of specific plants. These individuals, the first shamans or seers, became the bridge between the two worlds. They were the interpreters, the ones who could navigate the chaotic landscape of dreams and return with coherent messages for the group. Their role was as vital as that of the skilled toolmaker or the brave hunter. They healed spiritual ailments, guided the group through times of uncertainty by seeking visions, and performed rituals to ensure that the delicate balance between the human, natural, and spirit worlds was maintained. This rich inner life, this profound engagement with the world of dreams and visions was a final, crucial adaptation. It provided a psychological framework to make sense of a chaotic and often terrifying existence. It offered hope in times of despair, explanation in times of confusion, and a sense of control in a world ruled by colossal, unpredictable forces. By honoring their dreams, our ancestors learned to harness the full power of their own minds. They understood that the greatest frontier was not the vast forest or the sweeping plain, but the limitless, mysterious universe within. This exploration of consciousness, the courage to look inward as well as outward, completed the arsenal of the human spirit, forging a being that was not only a master of its environment, but also a perpetual voyager in the boundless seas of its own imagination. Beyond the spoken word, beyond the vivid imagery of dreams and art, another form of expression began to stir in the human heart, one that required no lexicon and obeyed no grammar, yet spoke a universal language understood by all. It was the language of rhythm and music. In the pounding of a heart, the rhythmic crunch of feet on a trail, the steady drip of water in a cave, and the percussive crash of thunder, our ancestors found the first beats of a song that would come to define the human experience. As profoundly as any tool or fire, the first music was not entertainment. It was an organic extension of life itself, the coordinated sounds of a group working together, the synchronized strikes of stone tools shaping a core, the unified grunts of hunters driving prey, the chanted calls keeping time during a long, arduous trek created a natural rhythm that strengthened social bonds and increased efficiency. This rhythm was a physical force, a vibration that coursed through the group, aligning their movements and merging their individual efforts into a single powerful action. It was the sound of cooperation made audible. The human voice, capable of so many subtle tones and pitches, soon began to play with these rhythms. A work chant might evolve, its notes rising and falling with the effort. A mother humming a soft, repetitive melody to soothe a restless child discovered the primal power of a lullaby. A storyteller recounting a great hunt might slip into a sing-on cadence, using the melody to enhance the drama and aid memory. These were the first melodies born from the cadence of daily life and the emotional need to express joy, comfort, and sorrow. The voice became the first instrument, Then came the discovery that the world itself could be an instrument. A dry gorge, shaken with pebbles, produced a rushing rhythmic whisper. A log hollowed out and struck with a stout stick produced a deep resonant boom that could carry for miles. A thigh bone dried and struck against another bone created a sharp clacking sound. A tense sinew stretched across a bent piece of wood and plucked produced a resonant twang. The ancestor of all stringed instruments. These were not random noises. They were deliberate explorations of sound, the first steps in creating tools for sonic expression. Music quickly became intertwined with every aspect of their existence. It was central to their rituals. The steady hypnotic beat of drums and the clatter of rattles accompanied the shaman's trance, helping to bridge the world of the living and the spirit world. It was the soul of their community gatherings around the fire. After a successful hunt or a harvest, the community would come together. They would sing songs of their history, of the great ancestors and the legendary beasts. They would dance, their bodies moving in time to the rhythm, their feet stomping the earth in a powerful collective expression of joy, relief, and identity. This was more than celebration. It was a reaffirmation of their shared life, a sonic tapestry that wove the individual into the whole. In this way, music became a vital technology of the soul. It provided a release for pent-up emotions, a way to process the fear and trauma of a dangerous world. It strengthened memory, making complex stories and vital information easier to recall and pass down. Most importantly, it created harmony. In a world filled with the dissonant roars of predators and the chaotic noises of the wild, humanity created its own ordered, beautiful sound. The song of the earth, first heard in the wind and the water, was now being sung back by human voices in human hands, a testament to a species that had learned not only to survive the world, but to find its melody and add its own unique verse to the eternal chorus of life. The survival of early humans was never the story of lone individuals pitted against the world. It was the story of the group, a complex and intricate web of relationships that provided the essential strength no single person could possess. This social architecture, the weave of kinship, was as crucial to their survival as any sharpened spear or controlled flame. It was within the family, the band, and the emerging clan that the human world found its structure, its meaning, and its enduring power. At the heart of this web was the most fundamental unit, the family. But this concept extended far beyond the nuclear family of modern understanding. It was a broad, encompassing network of parents, children, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Each member, from the youngest child to the most elderly elder, held a valued place and contributed to the whole. The very young were not just dependent, they were the reason for it. All the vessels of the future who learned by watching, playing, and imitating the adults around them. Their games were often rehearsals for the serious tasks of adulthood, practicing with miniature spears or mimicking the butchering of a small animal. The elders were the living libraries of the group. Their wrinkled faces and slow gait were not signs of weakness, but badges of immense experience. They had survived decades in a world that was quick to call the unwary. They remembered the great drought of their youth, the strange behavior of the herds 20 seasons past, the location of a hidden water source, and the complex rituals for appeasing the spirits. Their knowledge of plant medicine, of childbirth, of tool-making techniques, and of genealogy was indispensable. They were the counselors, the historians, and the spiritual guides, their wisdom providing the continuity that linked generations. This family unit was the first school, the first hospital, and the first system of social welfare. The care of children was a shared responsibility, with older siblings, aunts, and grandparents all playing a role. This allowed mothers to contribute to foraging and other tasks, knowing their children were safe and cared for. Food was shared, not hoarded. A successful hunter did not eat alone. His kill was distributed throughout the band, ensuring that the weak, the sick, and the very old were fed. This was not altruism in the abstract. It was a practical survival strategy. The strength of one was the strength of all. A healed warrior could hunt again. A nourished child would grow to strengthen the tribe. A respected elder would continue to guide them. As groups grew and interacted with others, these family bonds expanded into the concept of the clan. A clan was a group of families who shared a common, often mythical ancestor symbolized by a totem animal. The wolf clan, the bear clan, the eagle clan. This totem was more than a symbol. It was a spiritual identity, a source of pride, and a set of behavioral expectations. The clan system created a wider network of obligation and alliance. If one clan faced famine, a related clan might share resources. Marriages were often arranged between clans to strengthen these bonds, weaving an ever larger safety net across the landscape. This intricate weave of kinship was the true fortress of early humanity. It provided emotional security in a terrifying world, a sense of belonging that fortified the human spirit. It efficiently organized labor and distributed resources, maximizing the group's chances of survival. It created a framework for resolving conflicts and maintaining order without the need for formal laws. The loyalty to one's family and clan was the most powerful force in a person's life, a force that would compel incredible acts of courage, self-sacrifice, and endurance. Before they built walls of stone, humans built walls of people. And this living, breathing fortress, bound by blood and shared purpose, proved to be the most resilient structure of all. For countless generations, the world of early humans was defined by the solidity of the land, its forests, its plains, and its mountains. Rivers were obstacles to be forded or followed, and the great expanse of the sea was a terrifying, unknowable frontier, a realm of roaring waves and unseen depths. But as the human spirit of exploration pushed against the boundaries of the known world, a monumental transition began. The same ingenuity that had mastered the stone and the spark now turned toward a new element, water. The first hesitant steps into the shallows would eventually lead to one of humanity's greatest adventures, the deliberate conquest of the waters. It likely began with observation and necessity. They would have seen fallen logs floating effortlessly down a river, or animals, like deer and bears, swimming across narrow stretches of water to reach new grazing grounds. The first foray were probably simple acts of clinging to a floating log to cross a river that was too deep or too swift to wade through. This was a revelation. The water, once a barrier, could become a pathway. The next logical step was to seek control. They began to select and shape these logs, using fire to hollow them out and stone adze to smooth their shape, creating the first dugout canoes. These heavy, cumbersome vessels were unstable, but they worked. They allowed a hunter to cross a river quickly, to access islands rich in bird eggs or shellfish, and to fish in deeper waters. Along the coastlines, another technology emerged, using materials readily available, bundles of reeds, inflated animal skins, or logs lashed together with sinew and plant fibers. They constructed the first rafts. These were broader, more stable platforms than the dugouts, capable of carrying several people and their cargo with simple poles or crude paddles carved from wood. They learned to navigate the calmer waters of rivers, lakes, and sheltered coastal bays. This was not seafaring in the open ocean sense. It was a cautious extension of their terrestrial world, a way to exploit the rich resources of the aquatic environment. The impact of these first watercraft was profound. Coastal groups were no longer limited to the land's edge. They could travel to offshore islands that had never known the presence of humans, finding new territories devoid of large predators and rich in unique resources. Rivers became highways, allowing for the transport of goods, the exchange of ideas between distant groups, and much faster, safer travel than was possible through dense predator-filled forests. A journey that might have taken days on foot could be accomplished in hours by water. This mastery of water travel represented the final stage in humanity's physical dispersal across the globe. It was by boat that the final great voyages of exploration were made, reaching the far-flung islands of the Pacific and the remote continents that land bridges could not provide. It required a new kind of courage to venture out of sight of land, to navigate by the sun and stars, and to trust in a fragile vessel against the power of the open sea. The boat, like the controlled fire and the stone tool, was more than just a practical object. It was a symbol of a new relationship with the world. It demonstrated that no barrier was absolute, that no horizon was final. The human desire to see what lay beyond the next hill had found its ultimate expression in the desire to see what lay beyond the next wave. With the invention of the first watercraft, humanity had truly become a global species. Its destiny now irrevocably linked to the vast blue highways of the world, opening a new and endless chapter in the epic story of exploration. Long before complex sentences were formed, before words for every object and action existed, humans communicated with a rich and nuanced vocabulary of the body. This was the silent language of gesture, expression, and posture, a universal code that transcended the barriers of emerging dialects and tribal tongues. In a world where a single miscommunication could spell disaster, this unspoken dialogue was as vital to survival as a sharp spear or a warm fire. The human face was a canvas of emotion, its movements instantly readable to those within the social group. A slight widening of the eyes and a sharp intake of breath signaled alarm, freezing a foraging party in their tracks before a predator was even seen. A relaxed smile and soft eyes conveyed safety and contentment, strengthening social bonds around the evening fire. A clenched jaw and a furrowed brow displayed anger or determination, a clear warning to others to tread carefully. This facial grammar was learned from infancy, a fundamental skill for integrating into the community and understanding its complex social dynamics. The body, too, spoke volumes. The posture of a person told a story of their confidence, fatigue, or fear. A hunter returning to camp with shoulders slumped and head down communicated failure and disappointment without uttering a word, preparing the group for a lean evening. In contrast, a straight back, a raised chin, and a purposeful stride broadcast success, triggering waves of relief and anticipation. The way individuals held themselves in relation to others established hierarchy and respect. A subtle lowering of the head showed deference to a skilled elder or a strong leader, while an open posture and direct gaze fostered trust and cooperation. During collaborative tasks like butchering a large kill or building a shelter, this silent language reached its highest form in the deliberate use of gesture. A complex hunt could be coordinated almost entirely through hand signals. A raised fist might mean halt. A flat hand pushed downward signaled get low. A pointing finger combined with a specific look could direct attention to a specific animal in a herd or a potential danger hiding in the undergrowth. These gestures were not random. They were a culturally shared code, practiced and refined, until they became as clear and precise as spoken commands. Around the campfire, stories were not just told, they were performed. A storyteller would act out the chase, using their body to become the stealthy hunter, the charging beast, and the triumphant victor, making the narrative visceral and unforgettable for the listeners, especially the children who were absorbing the lore of their people. This profound reliance on non-verbal communication forged an intense, almost palpable sense of empathy and shared understanding within the group. They became experts at reading the slightest shift in mood, the most subtle flicker of intention. This created a social cohesion that was incredibly resilient. It was a language of immediate truth, where a false smile or a faint posture was difficult to maintain. In the harsh, honest world of prehistory, the body could not lie. This silent conversation, constantly flowing between individuals, was the glue that held the first human communities together. A quiet, continuous testament to their deep interconnection and their shared journey through a world full of wonders and terrors. As the great climatic shifts continued to reshape the planet, some bands of early humans found themselves confronting the most formidable environment yet: the relentless advance of the ice. This was not the gentle snowfall of winter, but the creeping monumental presence of glaciers, rivers of ice that ground mountains to dust and scoured the land down to its bare stone. For those who dared to remain at the edges of this frozen world, survival demanded a new level of resilience. Innovation and cooperation, they became the children of the ice, mastering a white wilderness where every breath was a cloud of steam and every day was a battle against the cold. The first and most pressing challenge was the cold itself. The simple hides and shelters that sufficed in more temperate regions were inadequate here. Innovation in clothing became a matter of life and death. They learned to sew with incredible precision, using bone needles and sinew thread to create layered form-fitting garments from the furs of Arctic foxes, reindeer, and wolves. These were not loose wraps, but engineered suits with hoods to protect the face, mittens to shield the fingers, and boots lined with dry grass for insulation. The ability to trap a layer of warm air against the skin was a technological breakthrough as significant as the control of fire. Their shelters too transformed. While caves were still prized, they were not always available on the open tundra. So they learned to build with the very substance that threatened them: snow. Using knives of bone and ivory, they cut blocks of compacted snow, stacking them in a rising spiral to form dew structures. The first iglet, inside a single oil lamp, burning the fat of seals or mammoths, could raise the temperature enough to make the shelter habitable. The snow itself providing superb insulation against the howling winds outside in forested areas near the ice. They constructed sturdy semi-optron huts using mammoth bones and tusks as frameworks, which were then covered with layers of hides and sod. Hunting in this environment required unique strategies. The great mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses were still prime targets, but the open snowy landscape made stalking difficult. Hunters became masters of camouflage, draping themselves in white furs to blend into the terrain. They learned to anticipate the movements of herds across the vast frozen plains, setting traps in narrow passes or at river crossings. The pursuit was even more grueling than in other climates, a test of endurance where a single misstep in deep snow could mean death, but the reward was immense. A single mammoth provided not only food for weeks, but also bones and tusks for tools, art and shelter construction, and thick hides for warmth. Life in the shadow of the glaciers forged a unique and profound relationship with the environment. They tracked time by the incredible shifts in daylight, enduring the long dark nights of winter and celebrating the endless twilight of the summer months. They developed a deep spiritual connection to the animals that sustained them, their survival inextricably linked to the great migrations of the reindeer and the mammoth. Their art, often small portable carvings of ivory and bone, reflected their world depictions of bears, seals, and mammoths, rendered with a stunning accuracy that spoke of intimate observation and respect. These communities of the North became some of the hardiest humans to have ever lived. Their existence was a testament to the extreme adaptability of the human species. They did not merely endure the ice, they learned its secrets. They used its materials, and they thrived in its harsh embrace. The children of the ice proved that no corner of the planet, no matter how fierce or frozen, was beyond the reach of human courage and ingenuity. Their success in the white sealed humanity's destiny as the ultimate survivor, capable of making a home in the heart of winter itself. And so the long twilight of the Age of Monsters recedes into the dawn of human dominion. The thunderous footsteps of the mammoth fade into silence. The haunting cry of the saber-toothed cat is heard no more, and the vast untamed wilderness that once tested our ancestors at every turn has been forever altered. We stand now, their descendants, in a world of our own making, a world of cities and fields, of technology and information. Yet, if we listen closely in the quiet moments between the noises of modern life, we can still hear the faint, persistent echo of that ancient world and feel its legacy etched deep within our very bones. The story of how early humans survived is not a tale of brute force, but a symphony of emerging intelligence. It is the story of the spark in the darkness, the sharpened stone in the hand, the shared story around the fire, and the coordinated hunt on the plain. It is the story of the first alliance with the wolf, the first song sung to the stars, and the first dream given form on a cave wall. These were not separate events, but interconnected threads in a single magnificent tapestry of adaptation. Our ancestors looked upon a world of immense challenges and did not see insurmountable obstacles. They saw puzzles to be solved. They faced the monsters not only of tooth and claw, but of hunger, cold, and despair. And they prevailed through a combination of courage, cooperation, and an unyielding curiosity. This is our inheritance. The same ingenuity that crafted a hand axe from flint now designs silicon chips. The same cooperation that brought down a mammoth now builds international space stations. The same need for story that played out on cave walls now unfolds on cinema screens. The monsters have changed their form, but the human qualities required to face them remain unchanged. We still grapple with fear. We still strive for community. We still seek to understand our world. And we still use the tools of innovation and shared knowledge to build a future. The journey from the cave to the city, from the hunting band to the global civilization, was long and arduous, paved with countless acts of courage and perseverance. It is a journey that continues in each of us, for the world in its own way still holds challenges that seem monstrous, and we, the children of those first survivors, carry their fire within us, the fire of resilience, the fire of creativity, and the fire of an unbreakable spirit. The age of giants is over. This journey from the world of the giants and the story of the quiet, victory won through human patience and ingenuity, come to an end here. Thanks to that first great collaboration, which enabled a group of people to bring down a giant mammoth and the sense of security found around the fire. We learned that physical strength is fleeting, but strategy and unity are the true forces that build civilization. Take care of yourselves until our next journey.